For months, Sarah had been experiencing all the signs of pregnancy: morning sickness, fatigue, and a growing belly. Excited and nervous, she finally decided to visit her doctor for an ultrasound, eager to see the first glimpse of her baby. But the moment the image appeared on the screen, her excitement turned to shock. What she saw was nothing like what she had expected. What could have caused this unexpected result? Let's find out. Sarah had been waiting for this moment for weeks. She sat in the examination room, her hands resting on her belly, where she believed a tiny life was growing inside her. Ever since she saw the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, she had dreamed of the months ahead, feeling the first kicks, shopping for baby clothes, and finally, the day she would hold her child in her arms. The morning sickness, the fatigue, even the gradual swelling of her abdomen, all of it convinced her that she was about to become a mother. Friends and family had already congratulated her, excitedly talking about baby names and nursery decorations. Everything seemed certain. There was no reason to doubt it. The doctor smiled reassuringly as she applied the cool ultrasound gel to Sarah's belly and began moving the probe across her skin. Sarah's eyes were fixed on the screen, waiting for the magical moment when she would see her baby for the first time. But then, something felt off. The doctor's smile faded slightly as she adjusted the probe, moving it across Sarah's abdomen again. A strange silence filled the room. Sarah frowned. Is something wrong? The doctor didn't respond immediately. She kept scanning, her brows furrowed, her expression unreadable. Then finally she spoke. Sarah, I need to talk to you about something. Sarah's heart pounded. There was no tiny heartbeat, no small figure curled up in the darkness of her womb. Instead, the screen displayed something she didn't recognize: clusters of abnormal tissue, resembling a bunch of grapes rather than a developing baby. Her fingers tightened around the fabric of her shirt. What was going on? If there was no baby, then what had she been experiencing all this time? Sarah had no idea that what she was about to hear would change everything she thought she knew about pregnancy. The silence in the exam room grew heavier with each passing second. Sarah's heartbeat thundered in her ears as she watched the doctor's expression shift from confusion to concern. Dr. Mitchell, a seasoned OBGYN at a well-respected clinic in Chicago, slowly removed the ultrasound probe and turned to face Sarah with a measured expression. Sarah, she began, her voice gentle but firm, I know you came in today expecting to see your baby, but there's something we need to discuss. Sarah felt her throat tighten. What do you mean? Am I not pregnant? Dr. Mitchell sighed, pulling her stool closer. You did conceive, but what we're seeing on the ultrasound isn't a normal pregnancy. She hesitated for a moment before continuing. It looks like a molar pregnancy. Sarah blinked. A what? The doctor adjusted her position, her tone carefully controlled. A molar pregnancy happens when an error occurs during fertilization, leading to abnormal tissue growth in the uterus instead of a developing baby. The symptoms can mimic a normal pregnancy: missed periods, nausea, even a growing belly, but instead of an embryo, the ultrasound shows clusters of cysts. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. But the test was positive. I've been feeling pregnant. How is that possible? Dr. Mitchell nodded. Your body still produces pregnancy hormones, which is why the test came back positive and why you've had all the symptoms. But unfortunately, there's no baby growing in your womb. The words hung in the air like a dense fog, suffocating and unreal. Sarah's fingers gripped the exam table as the reality of the situation slowly sank in. This wasn't the joyful ultrasound appointment she had envisioned. Instead of seeing her baby's first image, She was being told that her pregnancy was never viable, that all the dreams she had built over the past weeks had been based on something that was never truly there. Her voice wavered. So, what happens now? Dr. Mitchell's expression softened. We need to remove the abnormal tissue as soon as possible. If left untreated, it can continue to grow and, in rare cases, lead to complications. She reached for a pamphlet from the nearby desk. I'll explain everything in detail, but first, I want you to take a moment to breathe. I know this is a lot to take in. Sarah barely registered the words. All she could think about was how quickly everything had changed. Just minutes ago, she had believed she was going to be a mother. Now, she was being told that her body had betrayed her in the cruelest way possible. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at the dark ultrasound screen. There was no baby. There never had been. The car ride home was a blur. Sarah barely remembered walking out of the clinic, barely heard Dr. Mitchell's reassurances that they would take care of everything. All she could focus on was the weight in her chest, the crushing emptiness that had replaced the excitement she had carried for weeks. When she stepped into her apartment, the first thing she saw was the tiny onesie hanging on the back of a chair, a gift from her best friend, Emily, who had given it to her the moment she announced her pregnancy. It had been a joke at the time, a onesie with the words "Mommy's Little Peanut" written across the front. Sarah had laughed, hugging it to her chest, imagining the day she would finally dress her baby in it. Now it felt like a cruel reminder of what she had lost. Collapsing onto the couch, she stared at the ultrasound pamphlet still clutched in her hand. Molar pregnancy, understanding your diagnosis. She hadn't been able to read a single word of it. Her phone buzzed beside her. A text from her mom. Mom, how did the appointment go? Can't wait to see baby pictures. Sarah swallowed hard, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. How was she supposed to respond to that? How was she supposed to explain that there was no baby, that there never had been? Her hands trembled as she finally typed back, Sarah, can I call you later? She dropped the phone onto the coffee table and pressed her palms into her eyes, trying to hold back the tears. But they came anyway, silent and relentless. She wasn't just grieving the pregnancy. She was grieving the future she had imagined, the one where she would decorate a nursery, where she would feel her baby kick for the first time, where she would hear that first cry in the delivery room. And now, instead of preparing for motherhood, she had to prepare for surgery. The next morning, Sarah sat in Dr. Mitchell's office again, this time in a private consultation room. She felt hollow, like a shell of herself, as the doctor explained what would happen next. We need to perform a DNC procedure, a dilation and curettage, to remove the abnormal tissue from your uterus, Dr. Mitchell said gently. It's a fairly quick procedure, done under anesthesia, and you should be able to go home the same day. Sarah nodded numbly. And after that? Dr. Mitchell hesitated. We'll need to monitor your HCG levels, the pregnancy hormone, to make sure they drop back to zero. In rare cases, molar tissue can persist and cause complications. If that happens, we may need additional treatment. Sarah exhaled shakily. She had barely processed losing the pregnancy, and now she had to worry about complications? I don't understand why this happened, she admitted, her voice cracking. Dr. Mitchell's face softened. It's not your fault, Sarah. Molar pregnancies happen due to a genetic error at conception. There's nothing you did wrong, and nothing you could have done to prevent it. Sarah bit her lip, blinking back more tears. But I really thought I was pregnant. I felt it. Dr. Mitchell nodded. Your body thought so too. That's the cruel part of a molar pregnancy. It tricks your body into thinking it's carrying a baby. It's why you had symptoms, why your belly grew. She paused before adding, "It's okay to grieve, Sarah. What you're going through is real." Real. The word lingered in Sarah's mind. The baby might not have been real, but her pain was. And now she had to find a way to move forward. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and clean linen, a scent that made Sarah's stomach turn. She lay on the gurney in a thin hospital gown, staring at the fluorescent lights above her. The room was cold, but the chill she felt came from somewhere deeper inside. A nurse stood by her side, adjusting the 4-line in her hand. "We'll be taking you in soon, sweetheart," she said with a kind smile. "Do you have anyone here with you?" Sarah hesitated. Emily had offered to come, but she had said no. Her mother had wanted to fly in from Ohio, but Sarah had insisted she didn't need anyone. The truth was, she wasn't ready to face their pity, their concern. "I'm fine," she said quietly. The nurse nodded, though her eyes held something like understanding. Moments later, Dr. Mitchell appeared beside her. "Sarah," she greeted gently, her voice steady. "The procedure should take about 30 minutes. You'll be under anesthesia the entire time, and we'll monitor you closely. When you wake up, you may feel some cramping, but we'll manage the pain." Sarah swallowed, nodding. Dr. Mitchell's expression softened. "I know this is hard, but you're not alone in this." Sarah forced a small smile, even though she didn't believe it. A few minutes later, an anesthesiologist leaned over her. "Okay, Sarah, I'm going to start the medication now. You might feel a little lightheaded." The world blurred. The bright lights faded. Then, nothing. When Sarah's eyes fluttered open, she felt groggy and disoriented. A dull ache sat low in her abdomen, but the pain was manageable. The hum of distant voices and beeping monitors filled the air. A nurse noticed her stirring. "Welcome back, Sarah. You did great." Sarah blinked slowly. It was over. The tissue was gone. Her hands instinctively moved to her belly, which now felt empty. She had known there was no baby, but before today, at least she had still been carrying something. Now that was gone too. A fresh wave of grief threatened to pull her under. Dr. Mitchell appeared at her bedside, her voice soft. "The procedure went well. We were able to remove all the abnormal tissue. We'll keep monitoring your hormone levels over the next few weeks to make sure everything stabilizes." Sarah nodded weakly. Her mouth felt dry. "And what if they don't?" "If your HCG levels don't drop as expected, we may need further treatment," Dr. Mitchell explained. "But for now, focus on resting. Your body and your mind need time to heal." Sarah let out a slow breath. Healing. She wasn't sure what that even meant right now. The taxi ride back to her apartment was eerily quiet. The city of Chicago buzzed around her. People rushing to work, cars honking in traffic. But inside the cab, Sarah felt detached, as if she were floating through a life that no longer felt like hers. When she stepped into her apartment, the first thing she saw was the onesie still draped over the chair. Mommy's little peanut. A sob caught in her throat. She couldn't look at it anymore. With trembling hands, she grabbed it and shoved it into a drawer, out of sight. But even as she closed it, the pain didn't disappear. She sank onto the couch, pulling her knees to her chest. She had lost something today, something that had never truly existed yet had felt so real. And she had no idea how to move forward. The first few days after the procedure felt like a void, empty, heavy, endless. Sarah had taken time off work, but instead of feeling relieved to rest, she found herself trapped in the silence of her apartment. She stayed in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying the past few weeks in her mind. The excitement, the hope, the devastating reality. Her phone had been buzzing with messages from friends and family, but she hadn't answered most of them. Emily had texted twice, asking if she could stop by. Sarah ignored her. Her mother had left a voicemail after Sarah finally texted her about the molar pregnancy. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Please call me when you're ready." Sarah wasn't ready. She wasn't ready for the pity, the well-meaning reassurances that everything happens for a reason, or that she could try again someday. None of those words would change the aching hollowness in her chest. What hurt the most was that there was nothing tangible to grieve. There was no baby, no ultrasound picture to keep, no tiny heartbeat that had ever existed. And yet, she mourned as if she had lost something real, because to her, it had been real. By the end of the week, Sarah knew she couldn't ignore everyone forever. She forced herself to pick up her phone and scroll through the unread messages. One in particular made her stomach tighten. "Jake, hey, how'd the ultrasound go? I've been thinking about you. Call me when you can?" She exhaled sharply. Jake, her ex. The baby hadn't been planned, but when she told him she was pregnant, he had promised to be there, no matter what. He wasn't thrilled, but he had stepped up, even if they weren't together anymore. Now she had to tell him there was no baby. Her fingers hovered over the call button before finally pressing it. "Sarah." His voice was cautious, as if he could already sense something was wrong. She swallowed hard. "Hey." Silence stretched between them for a moment before she finally forced the words out. I lost the pregnancy." A pause. "Oh." His voice softened. "Sarah, I'm so sorry." "It wasn't a miscarriage," she clarified quickly, wanting to get it over with. "It was a molar pregnancy. There was never actually a baby, just abnormal tissue." The words felt cold, leaving her mouth clinical, but she had to say them. She had to make it real. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then, finally, he said, "I don't know what to say." Sarah let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, me neither." Another pause. "Are you okay?" "No," she admitted, "but I will be." It was the closest thing to the truth she could manage. A week passed, then another. Sarah went back to work, answering emails, sitting through meetings, pretending everything was fine. She went grocery shopping, did laundry, scrolled through social media, going through the motions of normal life. But at night, when the world was quiet, the grief settled in again. One evening, she found herself on Google, searching molar pregnancy support groups. She had told herself she didn't need to talk about it, that she could handle it on her own. But the truth was, she felt isolated in a way she had never felt before. She clicked on a forum post. "I had a molar pregnancy 6 months ago, and it still hurts. No one understands because there was never a real baby, but I still feel like I lost something. Does anyone else feel this way?" Sarah stared at the screen, her chest tightening. Then, for the first time since her diagnosis, she started typing. "I just had a molar pregnancy too, and I feel exactly the same way." She hesitated for a moment before hitting post. It wasn't much, but maybe, just maybe, it was a start. The days turned into weeks. The ache didn't disappear overnight, but slowly, Sarah began to feel like herself again. The online support group had been a lifeline. Women from all over shared their stories. Some had gone through the same diagnosis, some had struggled with fertility, some had felt the same loneliness she had. For the first time, Sarah didn't feel like she had to explain her grief. They understood. One night, as she sat on her couch reading through messages, she noticed a reply to her post. I felt like I lost a future I had already imagined. But it got better. Not all at once, not easily, but it did. And it will for you too. Sarah exhaled. Maybe they were right. She had her follow-up with Dr. Mitchell a month later. Your HCG levels are back to normal, the doctor said with a small smile. That means no further treatment is needed. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It was finally over. As she left the clinic that day, stepping out into the crisp Chicago air, she felt something shift inside her. She had been carrying so much pain, so much loss, but she wasn't trapped in it anymore. One day she might try again. One day she might hold a baby in her arms. But for now she was just Sarah, stronger than she had ever realized. She had survived. And that was enough.